Hi people, how are you? Welcome to our third class. A couple of questions to consider when we're looking at the Industrial Revolution. And as you're reading the chapter, you will see that there are a number of key features. Yes, the first one is that there's a big shift in the way people related to time. Yes, as soon as factories began operating, time began to be mandated by the clock. Yes, a clock was something that did not make much sense before factories. Yes, people measured time more in terms of seasons or day and night. But the idea of the importance of a minute because you have to punch in to begin working, well, that's something that begins with the factories and the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, so a whole new conception of time, a relationship with time emerges of this moment. And the other thing is, and another key feature is the question of alienation from the finished product. Yes, before the Industrial Revolution, what we see is, you know that I like the example of the shoemaker. Somebody made shoes, and they could see the whole process from beginning to end. Yes, now once you work in a factory, you are only in charge of one tiny aspect of making whatever product is that you're making. So there's this sense of alienation, of disconnection from the finished product, and that also affects the relationship between workers and what it is that they're producing. The other aspect that the book mentions, and it's important, is how machines used to be in the past, yes, as a way to aid the work of people. And now what we're beginning to see in these mega factories is that people are, as the title of the chapter says, appendices to the machines. Yeah, so they become like another element, and the machine is the important thing, and the people there are just to enable the machine to work. Yeah, so that makes also a shift in the connection between people and machines and work. On page 56, there's an extract that discusses the Poor Law. Yes, the Poor Law was a law that was an attempt from the British government to kind of counter the negative effects of industrialization and the social situation, the social tragedies that many city dwellers were living. And of course, this was met with some criticism, yes, with the idea, and that is what the book mentions, is the idea that giving welfare benefits might cause people to not want to work, or this might interfere in the natural development of the economy, etc. Yes, people like Adam Smith, for example, would favor this reading of the situation and the Poor Law. The standards of life, even we consider that industrialization was in the long run, I suppose, something good, in the sense that people's lives became longer and in the long run more comfortable, etc. But in the immediate effect was on a number of levels negative. Yes, the standard of living actually became lower. If we think in terms of how people lived in the countryside and what happened when they moved into cities and slums, well, actually in the countryside, the book mentions, yes, the idea that they could breathe clean air, they had access to clean water, they could eat. I mean, hunger was, unless there was a natural disaster, hunger was not such a big issue. But now, when people moved from the countryside to the cities, they can only resort to their wages, and if they have no wages, well, they starve. Yeah, so that is a reality that did not exist before. Yes, the question of poverty and social tragedies in cities became something that was not common before this time. And so this actually will create problems with violence, substance abuse, and alcohol mostly, And so we see a lot of indicators that actually the quality of life of many of these workers was lower and worse than what it had been before. After 1850s, we also have this question of machines becoming increasingly more complex, and so we need workers, no, the factory owners needed workers that knew how to read, and so the need for education became more important, and this put another layer of complication to the life of many families who have to sustain children through school. Yeah, so they have to wait until they finished school. Child labor was a feature that was very, very prominent also at this time, particularly for poor families that had many, many children. One way of solving this was to sell those kids into near conditions that were nearing slavery. Children were used by the factory owners for a number of reasons. One is they were small, so they could fit in the machines to fix them. Also, they were hired as chimney sweepers. Yes, chimneys were a very prominent feature in the Industrial Revolution because all these machines worked with coal, coal being one of the major causes that the Industrial Revolution took the shape and the strength it had in Britain, because Britain had been transforming their fuel from wood to coal, and they had coal. And so when you burn coal, you need the chimneys to just ventilate the furnaces, and these chimneys need cleaning because soot, which is what accumulates, like black dust that accumulates inside the chimney, it reduces the space through which the smoke can go up. And so children were employed as chimney sweepers, yes, to clean these. The reason why is because they were small, so they could fit in the chimneys and they could clean them. And that was a major source of labor for kids during this time. Also, of course, children were paid less than adults, and so it was an advantage for the capitalists to employ children versus employing adults. Among the causes that are discussed on page 60 in your books, we see that one thing that fueled the sort of the explosion of industrialization in Britain at this time was a new source of wealth. Yes, remember we saw this a little bit at the end of the previous subject, when we saw the changes in the question of how capitalism and labor were divided. Yes, we have this accumulation of land, and a lot of people forced out of their land had to sell their work. So this new wealth meant that there was a lot of new millionaires or very wealthy people that invested in industries. Other factors that contributed to this was the appearance of colonies, because colonies provided both the raw materials for the industries to start happening or to use, and then colonies also provided markets for the finished products to be sold. And so they were at both ends of the process. The slave trade was an enabling factor, as our author Fels says, not really directly a cause, but yes, as an enabling factor, because it created the possibility of having more raw materials at a very low cost. Now, at the end of the chapter, the other thing that's mentioned is that instances of resistance. Yes, we have the Silesian workers that destroyed machines. It was like, well, who is our enemy at this moment? What is causing our jobs to be destroyed? Well, it's machines, so they just went and destroyed the machines in a kind of naive misreading of what was really going on. But we will see that there will be examples of resistance throughout the 19th century. We're going to see a number of revolutions, and in which one factor will be the resistance of the role of workers trying to improve their conditions or resist the capitalist advance.